Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group, this time with a roundtable and our partner, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer-Ruth Green. She is battle-proven leadership. Today is Saturday, June 24th, 2023. June is LGBTQ Pride and PTSD Awareness Month. A lot of syllables and that letters in that. Our host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. My executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Arnold Productions. And don't forget Shakaya in the studio today, holding it down as our engineer. And we have our partner with us, Miss Jennifer-Ruth Green, Lieutenant Colonel. Ma'am, how you doing today?
Hey, Sean, how are you? Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday. So you are a Lieutenant Colonel in the Indiana Air National Guard. You're a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Two big things in your resume right there. Combat veteran. Not many people in the world can say that. You were in Iraqi freedom, and you're a founder of a business called Battle Proven Leadership. Take us back a little bit and tell us what Battle Proven Leadership is, and also what is important about leadership and setting a culture around leadership.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for having me. You guys do a great work here on America's Heroes Group, and I always appreciate the opportunity to connect and speak with you. But I founded Battle Proven Leadership not to be a moneymaker or a business or something like that specifically. It does do that, but that's a ripple effect of helping people who deserve better to have better. I firmly believe that people don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. And I want people to become the leader people want to follow. We spend a lot of time helping leaders, not even leaders, helping people to understand how to do the specifics of tasks. And we help them understand what tools are necessary and what skills are necessary, but we don't develop the heart set and mindset, what's needed to manage or supervise other people and how to do things. And so people get put into leadership positions and they have absolutely no idea how to be impactful. And this is what this is. It's an elementary starter course for brand new leaders. And we have the opportunity to just help people who deserve better have better, because we help leaders become the people that others want to follow.
And how does a culture play into that? Because like you mentioned, leadership is a skill, and it's something that, and for some people it's a talent, I would say. Some people are natural born leaders. Other people have to be taught how to be leaders. There are strategies you can employ. There's tactics you can employ to do that. But how do you build a culture around leadership for certain businesses? Because maybe they want to foster other leaders to step up and do some of the things so they can delegate some of the responsibilities and make their business more efficient.
Yes. And so I believe that leadership is the art of building mutual trust. And I came up with that definition because I said, well, is it a hard, fast skill that you have to either have or you don't have? And I said, no, I believe it's an art. When you look at an artist, you look at the progression of their paintings from the time that they were 5 years old and could hold a crayon or a paintbrush to the Picasso, to when he passed away. And you see the progression, the art, the growth. What was necessary as you continued to practice that skill set. And building mutual trust is what I believe a leader's main responsibility is, and that's what we teach you how to do. So the culture of building mutual trust is essential. There's a part of culture that relates to you as a person and how you develop that mutual trust, but then there's the active engagement and interaction with others, which is the other end of that mutual trust. So you have a responsibility, the receiver has a responsibility, but as the leader, you have to own the environment. So when I think about defining culture, I think it is not necessarily a culture of leadership, but is it a culture of mutual trust? There's this quote by Colin Powell, General Powell, former Secretary of State, amazing man who recently passed away. And he said, the day soldiers stop bringing you the problems is the day you have stopped leading them. Either they believe you can't solve them or they believe you don't care, but either case is a failure of leadership. And so how do you build a place where people who are on the receiving end of your leadership are ready to report problems to you? How do you get them to trust that you want to solve these issues? And that's what we talk about practically. And so I think, how do you measure culture? oftentimes you get different answers. It's, are they engaged enough in my life? Do I feel like the company cares about me? Do I get bonuses? And I think it's simpler than that. How does someone feel in the pit of their stomach the night before they start work? On a Monday night, do they feel sick? Do they feel, man, I'm going to get bullied tomorrow? Do they feel, oh, it's going to be hectic? Do they feel understood? Do they feel joy? Do they feel elated about the opportunity to get paid for what they do? And that's culture to me. How does someone feel in the pit of their stomach? And what we talk about is the fact that leaders have to own that. You have to say, hey, how people feel before they come into this space is mine to make or break. And if someone doesn't feel valued, appreciated, whatever the tenets are of, like you said, what you're trying to build, respected, those kinds of things, that's on you. And once you as a leader own that, then you recognize that you have to take steps to develop it into the way that it should be and recognize where it is and figure out how to get it to the place where it needs to be. But that's very important. Leaders have to own that the culture is theirs to make or break.
I think you touched on something really important and powerful, and I've heard that many times. I've had conversations with many people from my years where people are like, oh my guys, don't feel like going in. Oh my guys, they're just dreading Monday morning. They're dreading Tuesday morning, dreading Wednesday morning. But sometimes the leader's doing that too. The leader is dreading Monday morning and Tuesday morning. So part of that ownership is recognizing you have that problem, and you got to get into that space and get your head right to make sure that you can create that environment. Because if you don't feel it, how are you going to pass on to somebody else?
No, you're absolutely right. And if we as leaders are aloof, absent, not listening, we talked earlier about communication and how communication is a two-way responsibility. And I, as the communicator, cannot give to the receiver information that they may not take. Communication has not occurred until the person who is intended to receive it understands what action to take afterwards. And so I can tell you all day in Chinese, Sean, hey man, this is where we need to go. This is what we need to do. This is what time the show starts. And if you don't speak Chinese, just because I've said it does not mean that it was communicated to you. You're not here on time. You don't understand what's expected of you. You don't know where, your tools are in order to host the show. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. We have this process where we think, as a leader, I'm in charge. I tell people what to do. No, leadership is a burden of responsibility. And it is a mantle that you take on, that you are responsible and accountable for. And one of the things is culture. One of the things is communication. One of the things is ensuring that you fight for your people. And these are all elements that can't be overlooked. And yes, I've seen it where leaders hate that the environment that they're in. But when that happens, largely it's because they created it. And they have the power and tools to change it. And I think that's what we want people to have, an onus. Sometimes people feel that the role of a leader, like I said before, is merely to delegate, merely to tell people what to do, merely to instruct. And we've all had those leaders, whether they're NCOs or junior officers or senior officers, senior NCOs, where they just walk in, tell you what to do, no explanation, no personal heartfelt connection. And they only have one tool in their toolkit, and it's a hammer. This is what we do because this is the way it's supposed to be. But we all know that we don't respond that way. There are times when a hammer is needed. For example, when you're in combat and someone says contact left, meaning we have enemies that are to our left that are shooting at us, and we need to get down or we need to move or respond appropriately. Contact left, initiate contact left, get down, retreat. You don't have time to say, do you feel okay about moving? You don't have time for that.
Right.
But when you say, hey, we're going to make a shift in our marketing and I'm going to need you in this department instead of the department you're in, but I wanted to help you understand why we're doing this. I value your skills. It's not a demotion. Those kind of conversations. You have to own, not necessarily own how that person feels, but you have to own the culture. And if you have a culture where people are valued, respected, loved, appreciated, they feel all of these elements, then they will leave a culture that is a profound culture that you've developed and helped create, that is the one that you want to build. And they may choose to leave and say, you know what, I just don't need this. But at the very least, you as a leader understand that you have set a culture and they have left for not because of your failures or miscommunications. Like they have all the information and they have made a true choice based on having all the data points. So owning culture is a big, big deal. And I think it's incredibly important. But there are ways to be able to cultivate a culture of responsible people who value the opportunity to be in the office. And those are some things that we teach here at Battleproof Leadership. So
can you give us like 3 quick things that you can do to try and cultivate a culture? You mentioned communication, which I think is really important because that's one of the, I would say probably the number one reason why businesses fail oftentimes is because of lack of communication. People don't understand what they're supposed to do. They're not given clear instructions of what resources they have available to them. And that creates a big problem. You can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't convey it and can't get everybody to understand what you're trying to accomplish, and then the culture kind of develops into something on its own. It's not the culture you try to create, it's the culture that you let happen. So how do you give us 3 things that you can do to try to create a culture intentionally?
Absolutely. First of all, let me just say I wholeheartedly agree with your points there. But one of the things that you can do as a leader is to identify and solve problems. So realizing that that's your task because you own the culture, and if the culture is broken or the culture is inept or whatever it is, you own it, but you have to ID and solve those problems. So knowing that that's your mindset, how do you effectively do that? Well, one of the things is you solicit opportunities to listen. You know, we've heard often before in church and that kind of thing, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And we perhaps that's guidance that we should listen twice as much as we speak. And so I think leaders are listeners, and you're paying attention to what your people are saying and what they're not saying. And so I was talking today, I get asked this question often. People say, how do I add value to my organization? And I said, there are many ways to do it, but I will pay somebody more money to ask the right questions than to give me the right answers. The right answers show that you have a lot of information. The right questions show that you're engaged in critical thought and challenging whether it's the thoughts, the assumptions, the principles, and you're making me think and rethink some of the decisions that I'm about to make or that I have made so that I can be impactful so that we can move forward in the way that we need to. So when we talk about listening to people as they're IDing problems, you have to say, hey, are people asking the right questions? When you sit in a meeting and you say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and everyone goes, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, yes, boss, that's great. Or do you have people that say, well, boss, I don't know that this is something that we should be considering at this moment. And if you have people that are engaged in the process, then you are having a culture where people are engaged in your process, right? It's a simple simple relational idea. And then when people bring you problems and say, hey, boss, I don't understand why we're doing this, or can you help me figure out how to solve this problem or whatever it is, you actually own that piece. And so let's just say, for instance, so the first point I would say in summation is ID and solve the problems. You own the fact that whatever the problems are, you want people to bring them to you and you encourage that. The second thing is own the problems. So if someone says, hey, boss, the lights keep flickering in my office, well, have a system in place to help somebody figure out how to get the lights fixed. And you don't have the luxury of saying, yeah, thanks for letting me know, and moving on. I would say if you're somebody who's writing things down, put this in your toolkit. I understand, or I appreciate you letting me know. I will take care of that. I will take care of that. And that develops confidence in people to say, okay, I can go back to my job. I can go back and focus on whatever my task is, whether it's finance or IT or operations or sales, because whatever my problem is now the boss's. And now the boss has said they will take care of it. But then the third step to that is, after owning the problems, IDing and committing to solving them, owning them. And then the third thing is have a degree of urgency in getting those things right. Because oftentimes we hear people say, hey, I have an issue. And you say, okay, got it. I'm all over it. And then 2 weeks later, hey, boss, the lights are still flickering in my office. And if you don't have an update, or you don't say, hey, you know what, light bulbs in your office are $10,000, so we've got to put it in the budget. But what I'm going to do is plan an intermittent option for you, whether we have floodlights. I mean, that's not a good solution, but you know what I mean. We could figure out yes, something. But you have to have a degree of urgency, because you can't just say, oh, that was on my list. That's right, I was supposed to do that. Have a degree of urgency in getting things right, because then people will continue to bring you problems. They'll continue to give you things that you can solve. And I've had this question sometimes. People say, well, how do you prevent people from coming to you with all of the problems in the world? And I say, you equip your leaders to understand where their roles start and end. And so if something within this person's shop should be handled by their shop chief, their immediate supervisor, you say, hey, I appreciate you letting me know that. Thank you so much. That problem is actually something that so-and-so should solve, but let me know if that doesn't get made right in the next couple days, and then we'll talk about it again. But that's where they should be able to help you. And your lower level leaders, when you have meetings with them, you say, hey, your people are bringing me your problems. And the standard of expectation is that 90% of the problems should be solved at this level, and then I handle things that are at this level. But again, that's clear communication. I can own the problems, but I need to make sure that I'm the best person to solve them. And I want to make sure I empower and embolden my leaders that are subordinate to me to take responsibility for the things that are in their lane. So quick summary: ID and solve problems, committing to that process, owning a problem once it's brought to you, and third, having a degree of urgency in getting things right if it's something that you're required to solve.
So what you mentioned leads us to one thing which I'm hearing is organization. Can you be an effective leader and be disorganized?
Oof, I would strongly argue no. And I think about those leaders who have great executive officers or great chiefs of staff or great admin support, and those people are the hands for big-brained people. And I've known some big brains who do some great work, but just would never get back to people. And it stunted their growth until they had a responsible assistant. So somebody in that office has to be responsible for the mundane, if you will. And I don't mean to discount that at all. Our executive assistants are a key role in everything that we do. But I don't think you can be disorganized. But as a junior leader, midline manager, mid-level manager, you don't have the luxury of a full-time assistant. So you have got to keep it together. And I think that's one of the things when you talk about organization, the more committed you are to helping people do what only they can do, the more your unit, your team, your company, your business will help you to do only the things that only you can do. So when we talked about whose job is it to fix the light, whose job is it to make sure you have pencils? Well, ultimately the CEOs, but on a tactical basis, day-to-day basis, it's probably your immediate supervisor. And so when it comes down to it, the CEO should be working on ensuring the direction, the vision, the mission of the company is met, and that the goals are clear for people to follow. But you don't want your mid-level supervisor setting the vision of the company. In 20 years, this is where we want Toyota to be. Hey, I need you to take care of people. I don't need you to worry about 20 years. I need you to worry about Tuesday. And so it does take organization. It does take knowing roles. It does take ownership. It does take streamlining processes. But understanding that whatever your role is to own, you own it and you stick with it and you say, hey, this is my lane. And sometimes you have leaders that will say, hey, I need you to do this. And it's not your lane. And you have to respectfully say, hey, sir, I have 10,000 things on my plate. These are the things that are on my position description. Would you like me to tackle this? And if so, would you like me to change the deadlines for the things that you've already tasked me to do? And if they're like, oh, well, yeah, that's right. You do have those things. You know what? I'll have someone else do it, or we'll work on it, or you know what I mean? When you have those over delegators. Yeah. So sticking to your lane helps you, again, to focus on the things that only you can do and that you're responsible for. So I think those are some helpful tips for people who are listening.
So when people are running their business on a day-to-day basis, and they get into situations where they see that they're trying to be an effective leader, but they're not necessarily but maybe they don't have the right people in the right positions. What's the tactful way or the best way to address that issue? Because oftentimes, like you mentioned, you might be able to lay out, once you get to the point where you can lay out the vision, lay out the plan, have great communication, delegate things, but you just have people that are just not with the program, or they're not able to keep up with your vision.
And that is a great question. I love that you asked it, because I get asked that often. And that comes down to the onus of leadership being on the leader. And so putting the right people in the right place on the right bus is essential. And if you don't have people in those places, in the right spots, first of all, you have to say, that's on me. Not necessarily that's on HR or someone ahead of me, someone before me came and put these people in these places. Now you own it. If it is a problem in your organization, within your lane, you own it. And because you're committed to owning the problems that are there, you're committed to solving them, and you have a degree of urgency in getting things right. So you either have two options. You have to say, hey, can I train this person to become the leader for that place? And if so, get them enrolled in a class, get them enrolled in a certification, have mentoring sessions every month with them and say, hey, these are the things that I need you to work on. You know, in fact, I'm working with a colleague now whose boss firmly believes that they don't understand how to talk to people. And there's instance after instance where this person will say, in a way that does not communicate, I value you, I care about you, this is a real problem that we want to figure out together. It is merely, I have a tool and it's a hammer. You are wrong, fix it, dismissed. And again, a rare tool, in my opinion, that should be used, especially with adults and professionals. But that person has two options: figure it out or get out. And you as the leader have to be willing to have those hard conversations. You are going to have a degree of urgency in making things right because you own that everyone sits in the right spot. Or and you do that by saying, yes, this person should stay and we're going to help them get to where they need to be. Or you're going to say, hey, this is not the right fit for you. And I normally, when I sit down with people and have hard conversations, I'm committed to asking questions. So I'll say, hey, one of the things that I need you to do in this job is to take care of the mission, sales, and you're doing a great job. One of the other things I need you to do is ensure that our sales members are encouraged and valued. Now, as I look at our sales numbers, they're through the roof. However, they've been slightly declining. And I've noticed that some of our salesmen were getting a turnover there. Why do you think that is? Oh, well, these salesmen, they don't know what they're doing. They don't have, every time I talk to them, they just seem to get up and leave. So if there are three problems with three salesmen or saleswomen that you have tried to talk to and they've quit the next day, the common thread, what do you think that is? Well, they all have problems with, okay, well, do you think that the common thread could be you? And how do you think we should fix this? What did your conversation look like? And answering these questions or asking these probing questions to help people think critically, to say, man, I have to do better. I don't know how to talk to people. You know what? I appreciate that you've ID'd that. And I want to help you do that because I want you here. I want you in this space. I know that we can do great things together. But if this is one place we need to work on, then let's talk about how we connect and communicate with people. I'd love to sit with you every week and figure out how. Or I can enroll you in a course, or we can, whatever it is. But I want you to succeed. I want to set you up for success. So those are some of the things that I think we can do. But you have to own it first. You have to be committed to solving it. And then you have to have a degree of urgency with any problem you see.
What I hear out of that is collaboration, being collaborative with the leaders in your team. So that way you can have that communication and be open. We ran out of time, but wanted to ask a question. Next time when they come back, we can maybe jump off with this. What if you're that person that you're as the leader, as the CEO or the owner of the business, the person with that problem? And how do you, and so going back to that cycle again, because oftentimes the person who's running the business has the issue where they're trying to project their flaws or their problems onto their leadership staff, but there's got to be a process in place. We can do it with, I guess, with the organization. We got that lesson from you. Hire an assistant, get an executive assistant, get a great person that can be your corporate person that can make sure that you're organized. But what do you do about the other stuff? That's when we want to talk about when we come back. Jennifer-Ruth Green, Lieutenant Colonel of the Indiana Air National Guard. Thanks you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. See you next time.